Welcome to Resume Well. We're exposing the intersection of wellness, woo, and work. We've been told that the antidote to professional burnout is personal wellness, and sometimes that means confronting our inner skeptic and exploring the taboo anyway. This season, we're all about putting our intuition to work at work. Hey everyone, Courtney Page here, and welcome back to Resume Well, where we talk about the intersection of work and wellness. In this episode, I'm taking you on quite a different journey, one that happened while I was technically asleep. Or was I? That was very cheesy, but in any case, today we're diving into my experience with hypnotherapy, which was amazing, and I am so excited to share it with you. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Is this going to be one of those stories where somebody says nutmeg and now I'll forever cluck like a chicken whenever I'm on stage? Trust me, it is nothing like that. What I discovered during my sessions was both more subtle and more profound than I ever expected. And look, whether you're a skeptic, a believer, or you're just curious about like what really happens when somebody kind of quote unquote takes a hold of your subconscious, or you let somebody guide your subconscious mind, stick around, because this story might just change the way that you think about the power that you have over your own mind. So let me take you back to the day when I first walked into that office, nervous, pretty skeptical, and honestly, a little bit desperate for answers. But first, let me explain why I found myself booking this appointment in the first place. I had heard of hypnotherapy, mostly from people who were really desperate to try to quit smoking and everything else had failed them. All of the other methods just did not work. So they were like, fuck it, let's try hypnotherapy, right? Or somebody like my husband who wants to unearth his native tongue of Portuguese. And Rosetta Stone, Duolingo, they work, but they're a little bit too time consuming. So he really wants to try hypnotherapy to see if that would work. Or maybe it's something a little bit more serious, somebody who's worked through trauma and they've done all the other forms of therapy and they're still left unsatisfied with the results. Or maybe it's more elusive than that. Maybe it's a mindset that seems impossible to change or to overcome, or maybe just a negative feeling that has like embedded in your psyche and you cannot relinquish it. Do you see the pattern here? Hypnotherapy seems to be the place that people wind up after they've tried everything else, and they're a little bit desperate for resolution. However, if you look a little bit closer, I think what leads people to hypnotherapy is much more optimistic. Some people may call it desperation, and others may call it hope. To me, it reads more as hope. Hope that there is something you can still do to change, to fix whatever it is that is bringing you down. People show up on the couch because they haven't given up hope that they have the power to make changes. So what was I hoping to resolve with Natalie at Lotus Cove Wellness when I laid back on that couch? Well, let me take you through those things. There were a couple, but really I had to work through a few of them to get to the root thing, if you will, that was really causing me a lot of irritation, I would say. Number one, my positive money mindset. It always eluded me. I could never understand why I was not motivated by money, even though I knew I needed it and I knew I wanted it. But I don't know. I just always seemed to have enough for the life that I was living at any given moment. But I never felt the desire or the need to chase money. I did, however, always feel a very strong desire and a very strong pull to find meaning and purpose. However, it always seemed like the things that gave me purpose or a sense of meaning didn't have a huge monetary ROI. For example, acting. For a long time as a child and teen, and even into my early 20s, I wanted to be an actress. Tale as old as time, right? But unless you know somebody, and this is just my hot take, but unless you know somebody in the industry or you work really, really hard and, this is key, have a lucky break, it just felt impossible to make the level of income that I knew I needed to make in order to have a lifestyle that would make me happy. It also seemed like any career that was a well-known, guaranteed, lucrative choice made me want to run the other way. I don't know why. The third hurdle was, even when I knew how to make money and how to make money with my skills, it still felt impossible. Not hard. Hard is different. It felt impossible. Like it just was not going to happen. However, I knew that I had some kind of control over that part of the equation, which is why I think it was even more annoying. So after a lot of journaling, a lot of meditating, and all of the other woo-woo things that we're told to do to help reframe our mindset, I decided, fuck it, let's try magic. So hypnotherapy it was. And okay, I was pretty nervous when I showed up for my first appointment. And I remember asking Natalie if I would wake up not remembering my children, which seemed like a reasonable fear to me at the time. And I now know that was a little bit dramatic. So here's what surprised me about hypno just off the bat. Number one, talk therapy beforehand. I did not know that there was going to be a whole, basically like therapy session before going quote unquote under. So it was more than I expected, but I really liked it because it helped cultivate trust, and it helped me understand what was going to happen and how it all worked. And it also helps Natalie, the hypnotherapist, understand more who I was as a person and who I wanted to be as a person and what my real goal was, which brings me to the second main thing that is very important to understand about hypnotherapy, that it is, at least in my experience, it's specific to a goal or a circumstance. So it's not this like broad thing where you just show up and you go on, you quote unquote are hypnotized and you go under and they extract all these like random things that you didn't know were happening in your brain. That's not my experience with it. It was very, very specific to a goal or circumstance. So I went in saying, I really want to figure out what this money situation is because I know I can make a lot of it and I know I have the skills to do it. But for some reason, I have this voice in my head or this feeling or whatever you want to call it, that's telling me that I can't. And I know it's fucking lying. So like, what do I do? So in any case, it wasn't as if the therapist had complete control over my subconscious. That wasn't it at all. It was actually the opposite, which I think a lot of people don't understand about hypnotherapy, and I had no idea before I actually did it, is that you actually have the control. You are the person who has to allow yourself to, first of all, go under, right? And the more open and trusting I was of that process, the more I got out of each session. So it's I equate it to kind of a guided meditation. If you've ever gone to a yoga class and there's a really long shavasana at the end, that part at the end of the yoga class where it looks like everyone's sleeping, let's say that you're in that and the yoga teacher is kind of bringing you through a little bit of a guided meditation, just helping you to feel relaxed, however they do that. That's a guided meditation. And that's essentially what the hypnotherapist is doing. So she had me lay back. She had me concentrate on my breathing. She had me count. I think she had me count backwards. I don't even remember, but I do remember the most important thing that I remember that was helpful to allow myself to quote unquote go under was the heaviness in my arms and legs. She would say, your arms are getting heavier, your legs are getting heavier, like there's a big weighted blanket on top of you. And that really helped me feel safe. And it helped me allow myself to relax. And by relaxing, it allowed me to allow her more access to my thoughts and myself access to my thoughts. So I had about 6 sessions of this. And in the 4th one, we got into my childhood. And yes, believe it or not, my money mindset had been directly tied to a childhood situation revolving around, I'm going to get a little personal, which if you've listened to me before, it's not like my favorite thing to do, but it was so important in this revelation that I had and in this experience that I think it's important for anybody who's interested in hypnotherapy and has something very, very personal that they want to address in hypnotherapy. I think it's important for me to be honest about what happened. So again, I had 6 sessions, and in the 4th one, we got into my childhood situation. So it revolved around my estranged mother, who, and again, this is important to know for the purpose of the episode, she divorced my dad when I was 9. And when I was 10, she left. She moved across the country. And my dad ended up getting full custody of myself and, at the time, my older brother, who's now my sister. She's a transgender woman. And that was obviously very difficult for all of the obvious reasons. However, it was made more difficult because it was a very contentious divorce, and it resulted in a very, very dramatic court scene, which I don't like to discuss because my mindset over it was, it's okay, whatever, it happened, it's over, and I'm fine. It was sad. And of course, the lack of maternal relationship will always be a pain point, but I'm not the only one who's ever had to go through something like that. I figured, so, whatever, it'll be fine. I'll be fine. I'm good. That was kind of my whole mindset around it. So back to the session, we went through the whole scenario where I was essentially able to see that court scene from a different perspective as myself, but as myself now, as my older self, sitting with my 10-year-old self. And just that brought so much clarity and reassurance that my intuition at the time, when I was 10, that my intuition was right, which was A, this isn't normal. B, she's not normal. And C, how she's going about this is deeply wrong. And that felt like the hug I needed at the time. And my dad was great through the whole thing, but it's very different. A mother's love and a dad's love is very different. I think we all know that. And I have said, and I truly feel like that one session, so there were 3 leading up to that session. So those 3 hours of hypnotherapy felt like 15 years of therapy. Phenomenal. I mean, oh my God. It was very reassuring, and I would recommend it for anybody who needs to have that perspective shift for something that happened to them. So going back to why I went there, which was for my money mindset, I didn't think that I was going to get into all of this like childhood shit, but how does all of this play into my money mindset? Issues with your mother have been aptly described as the mother wound. I've seen this kind of floating around online, and maybe I've only seen it because I've looked into it because it's obviously something that I deal with. But don't you know, it turns out that the mother wound is directly tied to the money wound. So let me explain. As children, our mother is the most powerful presence in our life. Just from a survival perspective, we need her to survive. She is biologically engineered to love us and to be there for us, and we are biologically engineered to need her. As we grow up, money becomes the most powerful presence in our life, whether you want to admit it or not. If you don't have money, you have less power. Less power equals less choice for your shelter of choice, your healthcare of choice, your support system of choice, and maybe most importantly, your education of choice. The list is kind of grim, and it goes on and on and on. So for me, that mother wound, a wound in the most sensitive and vital place in my life as a child, seemed to directly transfer to the money wound, which is the most sensitive and vital place as an adult. Just knowing that cleared things up real quick. And I would not have arrived at that realization as quickly and with as much clarity without hypnotherapy. So if you are even the slightest bit interested in hypnotherapy, I highly, highly, highly suggest giving it a try with a therapist that you trust and that you've vetted. There are no side effects to it, which is great. And maybe it just doesn't work for you. That's the only side effect, right? it's such a gift to yourself in this season of giving. I think it's a wonderful thing to give to yourself. So thank you so much for listening, and please subscribe and follow to help our show continue on. Follow us on Instagram at Courtney Austin Page and on LinkedIn as Courtney Page. And please share this episode with anybody you think it will help. Thank you so much. And here is a little legal disclaimer. So this podcast and its content are for informational and entertainment purposes only. The host and guests are not licensed mental health professionals, and this podcast does not constitute as therapy, counseling, or professional medical advice. The discussion, stories, and opinions shared are based on personal experiences and should not be considered a substitute for professional mental health services. If you are experiencing mental health challenges or need therapeutic support, please consult with a licensed mental health professional in your area. By listening to this podcast, you acknowledge that the host cannot be held liable for any actions taken based on the information provided. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Resume Well, where we explore the intersection of wellness, woo, and work. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your friends, family, and coworkers. Remember to follow us on Instagram at Courtney Austin Page and on LinkedIn either at Courtney Page or at Resume Recruiting and Development. Join us next week, and in the meantime, resume well in everything you do.